Last fall on our program, we were over here at the home of Don and Brenda Johnson in Sapulpa. We're talking with Don about rose care for Oklahoma. We looked at the history of roses, we talked about some of the different classes of roses, and Don even gave us a lot of tips on how to care for roses in our Oklahoma gardens. Well, we promised you at that time that we would come back in the spring and look at some of these wonderful plants in all of their spring glory. So here we are back over at the Johnson's home to give you a spring rose show. Hey Don, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, welcome back to the program. And what is the first group of roses you'd like to talk about today?
Well, I'd like to talk about some of the wonderful shrubs and climbing roses and old garden roses. To me, these are the things that make rose gardening truly interesting. Not that I don't love the hybrid teas and other modern roses, but the variety available in this area is huge, and it's an exciting new area.
Okay, and by those old garden roses, you're talking about a lot of those that have been around for a while, and maybe some that some of the different types that only bloom once, like in the springtime.
Right.
A lot of those old garden roses.
Technically, an old garden rose is described or is defined as any rose that was introduced prior to 1867, because that was the year of the introduction of the first hybrid tea. So that's a pretty arbitrary distinction, and there's some overlap there, but some of the old garden roses have survived for centuries and are still beautiful today.
They grace a lot of gardens around the state. Well, I noticed that we talked about this rose right over here last fall on our show. It had a good display of flowers, very dainty single-petaled rose with some nice yellow stamens there in the center. Which one we got there, Don?
This is Lida Rose, made popular by the song Lida Rose. This is a good repeat bloomer. It has nice healthy foliage. It does get quite large. Here in the spring it's large, but it will be much larger even as the year progresses.
So you've cut it back a little bit this spring.
Cut it back radically, yes.
Okay, and right beside it we've got a large flowered rose. Got lots of clusters of flowers here out on the ends, beautiful colors. Which one we got there, Don?
This is called Sperry Shoop. It's a wonderful repeat blooming rose, not quite as repeated as the Lida rose, but some repeat throughout the year. Again, this is a rose that gets quite large. Even though it's quite large, it does have attractive, healthy foliage when it's not in full bloom.
I think one of the things I like about it is that you get so many colors there, because as the different roses, the different actual flowers fade a little bit, you get a different color in the whole makeup there of that color scheme. Well, right up here you've got some roses trained on a little archway. Which is the reddish pink one with the lighter colored center here?
This is Dortmund. Dortmund is, again, another very healthy rose, easy to grow, one of the widely grown climbers. Again, this is a rose with healthy foliage, one we could highly recommend to almost anybody.
Somewhat vigorous?
Vigorous. It's not a huge climber, it's a mannerly climber.
Okay, it'll climb, but it takes a little while to get to the top, not like some of those others that...
It won't take over,
get there pretty quick.
Take over the garden like some of the climbers.
Okay, and I see you've got another red one back here on the right side of this arbor.
Yeah, this is Stairway to Heaven. This is a new introduction. I believe it was introduced last year. We're real pleased with this climber. Has very vigorous color. Again, we're happy with the foliage. Easy to grow, one we can highly recommend.
And this is one that you might plant by one named Pearly Gates, maybe?
Yes, this goes well with Pearly Gates.
Well, Don, I like what you've done with the archway here. It looks like you started out with sort of a small metal arch, and then you've just kind of extended it into a longer arbor with this rebar. How'd you go about putting this together?
Well, it's very simple, Steve. We purchase rebar strips. It comes in 20-foot lengths. You simply bend it over to the appropriate length, bury it in the ground, and then attach it with just wire to some horizontal strips to maintain stability. Once the roses grow up on it, you don't realize that it's not a formal trellis.
Sure, you don't see it that much.
Right.
Yeah,
Works very nicely.
I noticed you painted it black to help it blend into the garden. That's what we tell folks. If you don't want something to show up in the garden, just paint it black.
Yeah,
and
the black kind of disappears into the landscape, especially with the color of the roses.
Yeah. Which one we got here, Don?
This is a David Austin rose. This is actually a climbing David Austin. This is a Shropshire Lad. This is only its second year of growth, and you can see it's already quite high. Most of the David Austins are advertised as shrubs, but in fact, most of them in our climate do need to be grown as climbers. There are some exceptions, but this one clearly is a climber.
I notice you've got a little bit of a screen trellis here for this to kind of support itself on.
You have to have some type of support or they just won't perform.
Okay. Well, you've got a nice mix of other plants in here with your roses. I see you've got some Shasta daisies and you've planted some foxgloves. I guess those probably reseed for you and come up in the fall. And
these are all volunteer.
Okay.
We pull them out after their bloom is complete, but the reseeding, no, we just simply pull them up, and the next year they all come back freely.
Okay. They drop plenty of their own seeds. And like your little planter of pansies there in the center. Good combinations for your roses. We'll see another darker red one over here on this support. Which one do we have here, Don?
This is a hybrid musk type of rose. This particular one is called Will Scarlet. This is sort of an old garden rose, although it was introduced after that 1867 date. It has a lot of old garden rose in it. It's one of those roses that survived many years. You get a very long extended period of bloom on this rose, and it is a climber. It's very easy to manage. We really like it. I think from a distance this rose really shows up well. The individual blooms are maybe not as beautiful as this rose here, Stairway to Heaven or Dortmund, but as an overall mass effect, this rose is hard to beat.
I love those yellow stamens in the center. That just adds so much to that one. Well, Don, I know there are different types of old garden roses. I've heard of Damask roses, Gallica roses, and Bourbon roses, and I know there are lots of others. But could you describe for me some of those different types?
Sure. One of the earliest roses is the Gallica. The Gallica is a once blooming rose. It has a lot of fragrance. It makes a very spreading out plant. It has kind of thick, heavy foliage. They're not widely grown, but they should be with anybody who has room for them. We have a very good example here of Cardinal de Richelieu.
This is this purplish color?
This is, I think, one of the most beautiful colors in rosedom. It takes on different colors as it matures. Almost has what's been described as a gun barrel type appearance at times.
I love that purple color. There's just a lot of petals there, and they're
Gallicas are typically heavy petaled. Here's another example of a Gallica. This particular rose was sold to me as Celsiana. Indeed, it probably is a Gallica, but it isn't Celsiana because it's much too dark for that. This is a very young bloom, so it hasn't really filled out yet. But it's very typical. It's heavily petaled, very fragrant.
The foliage is very crinkly.
The foliage is fairly typical of the Gallicas. Another type of old garden rose is the Damask. This is a very small early bloom of a damask called Ispahan. These blooms will get a little bit bigger than this as the season progresses. Again, the damask are once blooming. Most of the damask occurred in the Middle East. They're still widely grown there. They grow in nature there. The damask were instrumental in other crosses with developing some of the modern roses. The next example is a Bourbon rose. A Bourbon is an old garden rose. However, it was the first of the repeat blooming old garden roses. Developed in the early 1800s. The first cross occurred accidentally off the east coast of Africa and the island of Bourbon, which is now modern Madagascar.
Okay.
Fields of wild roses that were used to act as windbreaks included a China rose, Old Blush, and an autumn damask. And with this accidental cross, there was the development of this new group of roses called Bourbons, named after the Isle of Bourbon.
Oh, okay. So it's sort of a Madagascar rose, or the Bourbon rose.
The Bourbons are still widely grown today. They're very fragrant. They're fully petaled. They're very large. They can be grown as climbers. By and large, these are roses people need a lot of room for.
Okay.
You either need to grow them up on an archway or have lots of room and perform what's called pegging, where the
spread out the
canes are spread out and attached to the ground.
Okay. Well, I see this rose right back here. What the name of that one again, Don?
Cardinal de Richelieu.
That is beautiful. I love that color. It's a very unique color, I think, for a rose.
If you only could grow one old garden rose, I think this is the one you'd want to pick.
The foliage looks pretty healthy as well.
Foliage is very healthy.
Okay. And then we've got, I guess these are a few Bourbons here, these large.
This is one of my favorite Bourbons. This is Madame Ernest Calvat, or
Okay.
Calvat, C-A-L-V-A-T. These are repeat blooming roses, immensely fragrant. Another Bourbon right next to it here is
It's whitish, pale pink.
Coquette de Blanche. This blooms and creates fragrance in the garden even in August. So it's a very good repeat bloomer.
Good. Nice.
Again, you need a lot of room for these roses.
Okay. And right back here we've got the Damask.
This is the Damask. This is called Ipsalan. Really, by modern criteria, not a very attractive rose, but as someone who truly loves roses, I like to have a little history in my garden. So this is my one Damask.
Okay. And I guess there's another pink Bourbon right back here that we haven't looked at.
This is Madame Ernst Calvat.
Okay, that's a nice
We saw a
one.
bloom of that on the other side. This is
Okay.
one of the finest Bourbons. The
darker pink
red rose or deep pink rose adjacent to it may be the original Bourbon. It's called Rose Edourde.
Uh-huh.
Rose Edourde.
So that is an old one.
It is a very old rose, probably around 1820.
Well, Don, in this area, I know it looks kind of shady, but in the afternoon, this bed gets quite a bit of sunlight. You get several hours of sun on these roses. Is that right?
We probably get at least 8 hours, depending on the time of the year, and some days more. These are not ideal growing conditions. However, they are protected from the late western sun in the summertime, so that actually is a benefit if you can have some shade in the late afternoon in the summer heat.
Okay, so how many hours of sunlight should a rose garden receive?
An absolute minimum of 6.
Okay, full sun is best.
Full sun is definitely best.
But at least 6 hours.
At least 6,
Okay.
bare minimum.
Okay. Well, in this area, these are primarily floribundas. And can you tell us a little bit about that group of roses?
Yes, the floribundas are sort of medium-sized shrubs. For someone who's interested in a lot of bright, splashy color, the floribundas are hard to beat. They tend to have clusters of blooms at the end of their canes.
Mm-hmm.
The blooms tend to have a good lifespan. As you can see here, they're very colorful. They tend to be very bright. There's always exceptions. We have some rather typical pale pink
Colors.
colors, but in general, this is where the hybridizers
Have a lot of fun.
have had a lot of fun.
Right.
So for the person who wants a lot of color in their garden, really would recommend floribundas.
And a lot of people like this size of plant in their landscape.
It's a good manageable landscape plant.
Yeah. Well, right up here, this bright red-orange color, that is just breathtaking. What rose have we got there?
That is Sarabande. That ought to make a good OSU color, shouldn't it?
Pretty close, yeah. This is so bright. And right up here, this bicolored form, I mean, that is just gorgeous as well.
This is Betty Boop.
Betty Boop. Good color, good loud color. Good bright, cheery rose. And right back here, this one's just almost glowing here in the light that's
Oh.
coming through the trees. What do we got
This
there?
is Playboy. This is most people's favorite when they visit the garden because it's so showy.
It just looks like it's on fire. I love those colors. And right back here, another one of the two color or the bicolor blooms. Looks like it's sort of like a peppermint candy kind of thing. What's that one, Don?
That's sentimental.
Okay. Those that looks like sentimental doesn't have quite the number of buds, but the flowers are a little bit larger maybe, and certainly worth growing. And a rose similar to that one I see you got in the back with a little bit of purple. What's the name of that one?
That is Purple Tiger. Again, another very showy rose.
Okay, you got a lot of the striping there. Well, these certainly are a bright color combination of roses here, and I just love the height, and I love this landscape style of planting. And I see another climber here at the edge that I know is I think one of your favorite your favorite roses, that yellow.
This is Graham Thomas. This is another David Austin or English rose. I think this is, if I had to only grow one David Austin rose, this would be it. And a lot of people share that same idea.
Okay, and it's a plant that does need a little bit of support to grow on. Is that correct?
Definitely. If you try to grow this rose as like you would a hybrid tea, it'll just fall over on the ground and be floppy and not perform for you. It really needs to be grown as a climber in Oklahoma.
Okay, outstanding plant.